A quick note, this episode was recorded before the Trump administration reached into a comically large top hat in the Oval Office and pulled out a little piece of paper that said,
well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen, which is basically commonly known as Tylenol.
and blamed Tylenol for autism because the administration said in April they were going to find the cure for autism in September, and now it's September. And Donald Trump is stuck in the 80s, and he remembers that Ronald Reagan investigated the Tylenol murders in 1982, and everybody loved that. But there is no credible scientific evidence linking Tylenol to autism. But there is credible scientific evidence linking Tylenol to 30,000 Americans who get hospitalized with liver damage and 150 Americans who die of liver failure every year because of Tylenol overdose. And there is credible scientific and physical evidence linking Johnson & Johnson, the company that made Tylenol, to a smorgasbord of negligence, fraud, and corruption that killed and disfigured millions of people over the past 50 years. So put on your lab coat and take out your popcorn because this is the Corporate Gossip Podcast. Johnson & Johnson is the ethical company in the room with us. Welcome back to the Corporate Gossip Podcast. I'm your host, CPA Scorn, Becca Platsky, and I'm here with my co-host, who also is my brother,
data analytics playboy Adam Platsky.
And welcome to the episode that I really didn't want to do. I procrastinated this one probably for several months. I finished the book over the summer. I had the outline done, and I was like, I just don't want to do it. You know, we've trashed other episodes before, maybe because we've done the research and we're like, there's just no there. Or there's just not enough information out there yet, or it's a developing story. This episode is not that. This one is incredibly juicy. There is a lot to talk about. We have some villains. We have some heroes. We have secrets and drama, but it's almost just so fucked up. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. It's quite unfathomable. Did you have those feelings as you were doing this research? Did you feel any certain type of way?
Yeah, upset, angry,
Gaslit,
sad.
For all my true crime heads in the audience, you guys are going to love this one. You want murder? I'll give you murder. You want cults? I'll give you cults. You want lies under oath? Oh, we got those too. I got a veritable smorgasbord of deviant shit for all you little sickos out there. And like we do with every episode, when we get to the bottom of the trash heap and then we dig a little bit further into the stinky lair of degenerate J&J executives, we're going to read each of those dickless losers to filth, and we're going to have fun doing it. Everybody has a lot of memories around Johnson & Johnson. I want to show you an advertisement for Johnson & Johnson from the 70s and see if anything stands out to you.
I am stuck on Band-Aid, cause Band-Aid stuck on me.
Wait, is that John Travolta?
Yes. This is John Travolta in a 1970s Band-Aid commercial. There is probably no more quintessential American company on earth than Johnson & Johnson. And if you're an American, you probably have some memory of a Johnson & Johnson product. Maybe you had baby powder in your nursery as a kid. You took a Tylenol when you were sick, or you put Band-Aids on your forehead when you were 5.
Mm-hmm.
Or is that maybe just a you thing? Do you remember when you went through that phase?
You went through that phase. That wasn't me.
We all went through that phase. I have there's a picture of you though in the bathroom at home with a Band-Aid on your forehead. I think it was like a Nelly thing. What is your favorite Johnson & Johnson product that doesn't kill people?
Oh my God. My favorite Johnson & Johnson product that doesn't kill people is the first aid kit without the Tylenol.
Oh, okay. That's a classic. I love a first aid kit.
I used my first aid kit so many times this weekend because nothing makes you feel like you're a first responder like a Johnson & Johnson first aid kit.
It's so true. I have some pictures of some Johnson & Johnson products from the late 1800s, like gauze and dressings. And this is when people were discovering post-Civil War that like sanitation was really important to prevent infections, and people started washing their hands. And in the Spanish-American War, Johnson & Johnson was a main supplier of surgical supplies that they would use on the battlefield. The company was founded in 1886 by Robert Wood Johnson and his brothers in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Interestingly, the Johnson family themselves had a lot of family drama. There's a whole other book called Crazy Rich. Power scandal and tragedy inside the Johnson & Johnson dynasty. There's a dead father, absent mother. At one point, they send their son off to like a boarding school and he runs away. He runs back home. And then at another point, the mother leaves the kid who just lost his father to live with an aunt and an uncle that he barely knew in New York City. So I mean, there's a lot of family trauma in that.
Fun
that family.
fact: the family also owns the Jets, the New York Jets.
There you go.
The New York Football Jets. Was it Woody with all the issues?
Bobby.
Woody Johnson is the president of the Jets.
The heir to the family fortune, Robert Wood Johnson II, ends up turning into like a mercurial control freak who he would go through the plants and like look at the windows, and if he saw a single speck of dust, he would like take a brick and throw it through the window and be like, "Next time I come in here, the dust." So like that kind of boss. The last family member to run the company was Bobby Johnson. He resigned in 1964 and then died 4 years later of liver cancer. I don't know if it was related, but at one point he had like alcoholism. He was really overweight. He struggled a lot, and then he kind of pulled himself together. So I don't know if that's related to his liver cancer.
So you know a lot about the family, but based on the brief description you've given me over the past 2 minutes, it sounds like the Kennedys. Could you like draw any comparison to the Kennedys?
In this book that I mentioned, they say that this is like a super unlucky family. So eventually, once I finish the book, we'll do a whole episode on it, but it is very similar in terms of like a very rich family that has is deeply troubled. No family member would run Johnson & Johnson after Bobby Johnson in 1964 resigned. But by the time he did resign, J&J was the biggest healthcare conglomerate in the world, a position that it still holds to this day, largely because of really successful and robust marketing initiatives. Over the decade, they've received a gushing waterfall of positive press coverage, partially because of their massive advertising budget. In their 2024 annual report, they spent $22.8 billion in marketing compared to $17.3 billion in R&D. I thought that was kind of notable. They are the only company that gets to use the Red Cross in its logo, the international symbol for healthcare and humanitarian efforts. And like many of the companies we've discussed on this podcast, their marketing also extends to inside the company. This is like the cult that I was talking about, right? They have their credo, which is like 4 paragraphs long, but it starts with, "We believe our first responsibility is to the patients, doctors and nurses, the mothers, the fathers, and all the others who used our products and services."
Which, if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you know the credo means we're going to do the opposite.
On opposite day. That was the next sentence
Yeah.
I was just about to get to. There isn't a corporate retreat or an offsite or a meeting where they don't talk about that credo. Like they constantly are pummeling it into everything they do. And in saying that credo, executives say that they kind of have an opportunity to tell themselves, this is a good company. This is a special company. We are good people. But the author of the book that we read for this podcast, which is called No More Tears by Gardner Harris, he calls that credo corporate gaslighting on an epic scale. Before we get into it, a quick note. There are 2 different companies now in 2025. In 2023, J&J spun off Kenvue, which is a totally independent company that has Tylenol and some other pharmaceutical company products under it. It is an independent company from Johnson & Johnson. But for the purposes of this podcast, we are mostly talking about things that happened before 2023. So we're just going to talk about Johnson & Johnson, the company. We'll come back to Kenvue later. But I just want to make sure that I note that. Here are some of the products that J&J makes. Benadryl, Imodium, Motrin, Sudafed, Tylenol, Zyrtec. They make AccuView contacts, Aveeno lotion, Bengay cream, Lactaid, Listerine, Lubriderm, Neutrogena, Nicorette, Rogaine, Visine.
I think they really dropped the ball with Bengay. Icy Hot is a way better name. Do you use Bengay?
I didn't no, I only use Icy Hot
Yeah,
because it is a much better name.
I remember playing baseball, and one of the parents was like, "Why don't you boys go get some Ben Gay?" We're not gay.
What do you think their market is of 14 to 17-year-old boys?
Terrible. We were all using Icy Hot because Shaq.
Well, they got you with the Risperdal.
Yeah, well, they got us. I hung out with a majority schizophrenics, so it was actually it was a baseball team made up of schizophrenics.
Yes.
We all just stood and thought balls were coming
right,
at us all the
exactly.
time.
Yeah, you caught every ball.
Around.
They make one of 3 COVID vaccines, the one that I got in the Rockaways. We'll get into that at the end of the episode. Procrit, Risperdal, Duragesic, Ortho Evra birth control patch, and they also make medical devices like the Pinnacle Metal on Metal hip implant and ProLift vaginal mesh. Those last 6 products that I mentioned, though they were marketed as safe, though they were in the neighborhood of FDA approved, they were given to doctors to give to patients, and if they sound familiar, it might be because of this.
Attention, people who took the mental health drug Risperdal. Recent lawsuits have uncovered a potential link between Risperdal and gynecomastia, the development of female breasts in men and adolescents. If you or your son develop this abnormality after taking Risperdal,
call 800-40.
The Ortho Evra birth control patch has been marketed as a safe birth control method, but that may not be true.
I'm attorney Bob Goldwater.
Johnson & Johnson's Ethicon unit stopped selling 4 of its mesh products for pelvic organ prolapse. The FDA stated J&J sold some mesh before it was approved. Call 1-800-BAD-DRUG today for a free consultation.
Between 2010 and 2021, J&J spent $25 billion in litigation. That's $2.2 billion a year. They could have bought a Six Flags a year for that amount of money. There might be, according to the author, no more litigious company in the world than Johnson & Johnson. This is a fact. Of the company's 7 top-selling drugs in 2003, prosecutors would say that they were using illegal practices, including bribes, kickbacks, and deceiving the FDA for 6 of them. So how can both of these things be true? How can they be a trustworthy company? How can they be good and special and the most litigious and potentially most fraudulent company in the world? Are the plaintiffs here just jealous haters?
Yeah.
I close my case. Twin Cities Comic-Con is a 3-day celebration of comics and pop culture at the Minneapolis Convention Center, November 7th through 9th, featuring hundreds of artists and celebrities, including Brendan Fraser, joined by 4 cast members from The Mummy, as well as Rosario Dawson, Ahmed Best, Giancarlo Esposito, Amy Jo Johnson, epic rap battles of history, and many more. If you're a Patreon listener, you'll be pleased to know that Mark Summer is going to be there, who we thought was dead last week on the Patreon, but he's not. He's alive. He's going to be at Twin Cities Comic-Con. To celebrate Twin Cities' 5th year, they're adding 2 concerts, 2 wrestling shows, and many more after-hours events. Check out the costume contest on Saturday and Sunday. Get your tickets now at TwinCitiesComicCon.com and use code CG10 for 10% off. That's TwinCitiesComicCon.com or click the link in our show notes. People listen to ads on the Corporate Gossip Podcast because they're from listeners just like you. If you want to see an ad for your business on the Corporate Gossip Podcast, just fill out the form at the link in our show notes. We have flexible pricing that works for small businesses all the way up to big enterprises. And we have ad slots available as early as mid-October, so fill out the form today and introduce your business to the listeners of the Corporate Gossip Podcast. So let's dive in with corporate gossip number 1, which is the good special company in the room with us?
Do you think there's a Johnson & Johnson snark page?
We are the Johnson & Johnson snark page. Welcome.
Oh.
So most of you probably already know about the Tylenol cyanide scandal in the 1980s when a crazed madman opened bottles of Tylenol in supermarkets in the Chicago area and laced the pills with cyanide and killed somewhere between 7 and 11 people. There is a documentary on Netflix about it.
There's lots of documentaries about it. There's lots of documentaries, lots of podcasts. It has been talked about ad nauseum.
Yes. Despite that, when I first heard about this case, I was taking business classes in college, and we were taught that this was a perfect example of an ethical company who did the exact right thing, even though it cost them money. Even though it cost them money to do a national recall of all the Tylenol bottles, they still did it because, back to their credo, their patients come first, right? And they were the perfect victim. They could have never predicted something like this could happen. Bada bing, bada boom, big old business boner for this ethical company. And then a lesson for future business leaders. The company emerged stronger. 90% of the people polled after this event believed that J&J were blameless victims. Most people didn't even know at the time that Tylenol was made by Johnson & Johnson, but they did after the fact, and they trusted it. Because if they're going to do this huge recall, they must really care about us. The FDA also said almost immediately, 2 days after this came out, that Johnson & Johnson was not to blame.
From a financial perspective and an accounting perspective, what is that, just a massive write-off?
I mean, a recall is an expense because you're never going to recoup that. But on the flip side, like Johnson & Johnson did, they recognized a significant amount of goodwill from these actions.
How much did it cost them?
According to the New York Times article in 1982, it cost $100 million to pull. Not an insignificant number, but when you think about, again, the brand recognition, all the business students who would in later years learn what an ethical company Johnson & Johnson was, all the the emotional trust that they got from consumers because of this, it was way more than $100 million. So I would say solid ROI.
To the average consumer, they saw this as, like you said, a good move, and they care about us, thinking that Johnson & Johnson didn't have any idea how this could have happened, or it wasn't their fault at all.
Right. But would they have felt the same way if they knew the truth? That the reason that Johnson & Johnson could so quickly replace those bottles is because they had already been testing tamper-proof packaging, because there had already been instances of contamination in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
They also didn't, in fact, announce a nationwide recall right away, as the story says. It took them several days to do so. Not until news of a copycat poisoning became public a week later did Johnson & Johnson finally issue the nationwide recall. We're also led to believe that law enforcement was blindsided. I can't wait to tell you this story. You're gonna giggle so hard. So, a day before the first victim, a 12-year-old girl, died from taking Tylenol, 2 Chicago area sheriff's deputies pulled into a Hojo's. And in the Hojo's parking lot, they saw 2 big cardboard boxes with the words "extra strength Tylenol" on it. And there's hundreds of capsules strewn about and a substantial amount of white powder on the ground. And they noticed that capsules had been taken apart and put back together. They assumed that drug dealers wanted to mix Tylenol with cocaine to give the cocaine an extra kick. Is that a thing?
They're the cops.
They didn't report the incident, right? At the moment when they saw it, they just blew it off, drug dealers being drug dealers. Then they drive home and immediately, minutes later, have to pull over the side of the road and become violently ill with vomiting, headache, dizziness, symptoms of acute cyanide poisoning. They didn't link those symptoms to the Tylenol until days later. Now, I'm no cop, but I'm just going to go out on a limb here. Don't you think that if you investigate crimes for a living, poisoning would be on the syllabus?
Oh, I saw this on the documentary. Sorry for the fake laughter. I don't think it's funny, personally.
You don't think a little Keystone Cops action is funny? At a Hojo's? Law enforcement in Johnson & Johnson said repeatedly this could not have happened in the distribution system. It had to have happened in the store. That was wrong. The FDA said in the first days of the investigation that J&J has been absolved of responsibilities, and investigators focused on the store employees and the people at the store. I give this anecdote to remind you that the U.S. government, law enforcement, and regulators love companies, and they want them to be happy, even over the safety and security of the people that they're meant to protect. It was true in 1982, and it's true today. I'll fast forward a bit because if you've heard this if you watch the documentary, you probably know this, that they pinned at first the crime on a dangerous loner, and then they pinned it on a scam artist in New York. But to this day, the culprit has never been found. And the FBI internally, this is known as one of the biggest fuck ups. Thank God for Kash Patel. Because he's just gonna, now if you Google FBI fuck ups, this is gonna be at the bottom of the list. So I mentioned that the FDA cleared Johnson & Johnson immediately of wrongdoing. There was no negligence, despite the fact that Johnson & Johnson has a very complex supply chain that should have taken weeks to investigate and was very likely breached. They didn't canvass it. I mean, it's Johnson & Johnson. Look at them, you know?
I have done nothing wrong ever in my life.
I know this, and I love you.
The FDA has a criminal division, but according to the filing from the time, they never even picked up the phone to investigate the Tylenol murders. Most people say that's because J&J kept the FDA in the dark. Why? Because J&J is responsible for reporting breaches themselves to the FDA. It's the same issue we saw in the Boeing episode, and it's a theme that's going to run through the rest of this episode. It's like the NYPD saying, you know what, guys? We're just going to hang out at the precinct. If you commit any crimes, just swing on by. We'll get you taken care of. The FDA was also at the time severely underfunded. At the time of the murders, there was actually a government shutdown, and FDA investigators had to investigate things using their own time and money.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to do that in my free time, too. I love investigating things.
At least one whistleblower said that J&J knew their supply chain was likely breached, but kept it to themselves. And remember, if the supply chain is breached, that meant that the poisonings would not be confined to the Chicago area. So why was no one at the FDA at least asking questions? It's because the FDA at the time was run by the most corrupt FDA commissioner in history, Dr. Arthur Hayes Jr. He made his bones overseeing chemical experience for the military on prisoners.
Oh.
The classic come up story.
So was he the guy who was responsible for giving Whitey Bulger I forgot what therapies they used. I think it was using acid and it was a drug therapy that they used on Whitey Bulger.
This was probably before his time because this guy's like pretty old.
No, yeah, Whitey Bulger's pretty old.
No, but was he wasn't in prison until like the 2000s.
He was in Alcatraz.
For how long? When?
When he spent like 9 years in Alcatraz in the 70s.
Oh, no, I didn't see anything about Arthur Hayes Jr. and Whitey Bulger. He also took bribes from the pharmaceutical companies to approve their drugs. Testimony at the time says the relationship between the FDA and J&J at that time was a love fest. Wow. A little P.S. The health department's inspector general ended up uncovering the bribes, and Hayes resigned. And this is what he said on his way out. He goes, I think I'm a goddamn good commissioner. I think I'm an honest person. I know I'm a clergyman, and I'm also a good physician. I don't think there is a soul in this world that knows me that thinks I'm dishonest or lying or trying to make a buck on opposite day.
And I will be taking a job as a PR executive at a Johnson & Johnson owned PR firm. Name somebody who's more on the straight and narrow than me.
Dr. Arthur Hayes Jr. Money, please. The one good thing that Hayes did, I'll say this, is normalize tamper-resistant packaging, because in addition to Johnson & Johnson, they basically said everybody's got to do this now. So that's why we have tamper-resistant packaging today. I could argue if it wasn't going to be him, it was going to be somebody else, but whatever. All right, we'll give him that. We'll give him his flowers for that.
Hey, didn't he okay aspartame too?
He did okay aspartame. There was some drama with him and aspartame as well. So all you Diet Coke heads can thank him as well. Sorry, prisoners. So that's not the end of the story when it comes to Tylenol. And in my opinion, this next part is much worse and probably deserves more of a documentary than the cyanide poisonings. People go back to taking extra strength Tylenol, including a secretary for George H.W. Bush who took one when he had the flu. He ends up with acute liver failure and in a coma. Luckily, a guy in the neighborhood crashed his motorcycle and died, so he got his liver and he survived. But he sued Johnson & Johnson, and a jury awarded him $9 million in damages. He followed the directions of Tylenol. People knew at the time that Tylenol was tough on your liver, though it's gentler on your stomach and your heart compared to Advil and Aleve. So he didn't drink on the medicine. But what he didn't know, J&J knew this, but he didn't know this, was that if you drink in your life, the average amount of alcohol for people at the time, and potentially still now, I don't know the average amount, but 2 drinks a day for men. I think 1 drink a day for women, something in that range. At all. Not when you take Tylenol, but at all. And you take Tylenol, you are much more likely to suffer acute liver damage, which happened to him when you take a normal amount of Tylenol.
But I'm sure people were popping Tylenol as a pain reliever.
Yeah.
Daily.
Probably. And I'll get into some of the advertising for this drug, right? So Tylenol is the name for acetaminophen, which is a drug that relieves pain. But importantly, it doesn't affect the heart. So in order to be effective and sellable, Johnson & Johnson creates extra strength Tylenol in 1975, which increases the amount of acetaminophen from 325 milligrams, which is what was in the original strength, to 500 milligrams. It is the only drug on the market where the recommended dose is also the maximum dose. Today, you can still get, and by the way, last time I was home, I saw in Mom's cabinet a 650 milligram acetaminophen.
So what'd you do with it?
I threw it out, and I was like, please don't take this ever again. Even though our mom is sober, by the way, and doesn't drink at all, I was like, I don't feel comfortable with you taking that. So I talked to her about what else she can take. British researchers in 1975 said that because of the toxic impact on liver, if acetaminophen was discovered today, it would not be approved.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was a great quote I saw.
Or you would need a prescription
but
for
isn't
it.
that should be like, we should be doing reevaluations. Like, hey, knowing what we know now, should this still be like, it's not too late to take things off counters.
Yep. Isn't that interesting? The problem with that, and we'll see again and again, is that if Johnson & Johnson admits that this product is dangerous and could kill people, then what would it have said for all those years when they said it was safe?
Right. Well, then it gets into the issue of the FDA, right? Who's like, which we'll talk about.
We'll get into all of it.
Like, it's not Johnson & Johnson admitting it. It should be the FDA who's helping us, right? Because we think that the FDA is going to help.
In 1977, an expert panel convened by the FDA said a warning label should be obligatory on Tylenol. Over and over again, medical journals published studies saying people are dying. You have to put a warning label on this, warning people not to take more than the recommended dose. They also said that they shouldn't do a warning because symptoms of liver damage often occur too late for them to be reversed. And the people who did overdose on Tylenol were trying to kill themselves. And they knew of no documented case where anyone harmed while taking the drug for medical reasons, even though these medical journals had just published a series of case studies of patients who had experienced precisely that. The FDA and Johnson & Johnson went back and forth on this for a decade and ultimately agreed with Johnson & Johnson that they didn't need a warning label. And why? Because they didn't want people to see the warning label and get any ideas about killing themselves.
So I just want to rehash what you just said. Johnson & Johnson categorized any death from a Tylenol overdose exclusively with no other thing, right? Like if you took it while you were drinking and died, that was an accident. But if you took it exclusively, then it was intentional suicide is the way they said it. So anyone who's taking Tylenol and overdoses is intentionally committing suicide.
They didn't want to put a warning label on it because they don't want anybody to get ideas about killing themselves. Oh, all of a sudden you guys care about protecting people from killing themselves. About guns. Anyway. Interestingly, in 1997, they did a study on people who tried to kill themselves with acetaminophen and found that those people oftentimes survived because what did we learn a couple episodes ago? The amount of time that it takes you to get over a suicidal ideation is anywhere between 10 and 90 minutes. So if you try to overdose on acetaminophen, most likely you're going to end up taking yourself to the hospital where they can reverse the effects of the acetaminophen overdose on your liver.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're taking it over a longer period of time where you don't know that you're overdosing, at that point, it's too late. No one's going to try to kill themselves over a week. Like, it's just insane. So without that warning, which is going to like just fuck up the aesthetics of the packaging, J&J went nuts marketing this product as the most potent pain reliever you can buy without a prescription. It was the pain reliever hospitals use most. Safe, fast pain relief. In 1975, they had 25% of the over-the-counter pain relief market. Extra strength Tylenol made up 70% of their sales.
New extra strength Tylenol in capsules or tablets. When used as directed, you get Tylenol safety, and you can't buy a more potent pain reliever without a prescription.
I feel fantastic.
Exhibit A. This is Exhibit A.
Look at giving it to your kids. New improved tasting chewables Tylenol. It's good and strong. He's an airport fireman, so you know he needs some serious shit. To this day, 150 Americans die every year and 30,000 are hospitalized for taking too much acetaminophen. It wasn't until 2009 that Tylenol added a warning label. And I'll say this is kind of the trend of this entire book. Every time they would mention, oh, we found out about this in the 60s, we found out about this in the 70s, I kept thinking, certainly this was resolved by 1990. And every single time, it was decades later than I could have imagined. That is the theme here. In 2009, Johnson & Johnson said the science had changed, and we kept up with what we knew when we knew it. They also stress that they've always followed FDA regulations.
That was difficult to watch.
I tried my best.
You don't get the opportunity to arm fart that often.
I actually do on this podcast. You always follow the FDA regulations that you write. In 1978, an internal company memo, J&J boasted that they had persuaded FDA officials that an alcohol warning wasn't necessary. So if we tell people the dangers, they're going to stop taking it. Guess where the CEO of J&J at the time got his MBA?
Wharton.
Close. One more guess.
Harvard Business
Nailed
School.
it. Fucking nailed it. Nothing gets past these guys, huh? You tell people the product is going to kill them and they're not going to take it. Well, fuck. There's a really fine line, too, between how much acetaminophen can help you and how much can kill you. And for over-the-counter medicine, it's not supposed to be that way. If you take an extra Advil, it's not supposed to kill you. ProPublica writes about a 12-year-old in 1999 who was about our age, could have been our classmate. And here's an excerpt from a video by ProPublica.
I felt totally deceived. I never heard that Tylenol could kill someone, take someone's life, take their liver, totally. No one believed it.
There's got to be someone that eventually says, you know, this stuff can be decent, it can be good, but it can adversely affect you to the point of death. Billions of people take it. How many can die before it's an unnecessary number? In my case, it was one.
Can you imagine?
You look something up.
Yeah.
You look up Whitey Bulger's son. Because a similar thing happened to him.
Wow. Died age 6 from Ray's syndrome and allergic reaction to aspirin.
Yeah.
Okay, but you got your Whitey Bulger connection.
Now I got my Whitey Bulger connection.
Well, that's interesting. Can you imagine being a parent, though, and you give your kid what you think is good for them and it kills them?
No, I cannot imagine. I can't put myself there.
They ended up suing Johnson & Johnson. This is from the article in ProPublica. At trial, they testified that they never gave Davy more than the recommended dose, 4 grams per day or 8 tablespoons. An expert for the company testified that lab work suggested the boy had ingested more, 6 to 10 grams over several days. The difference was 4 tablespoons a day, but the company prevailed, persuading the jury that the parents had not used Tylenol specifically as specified. So they lost, and they lost their son. There's so many other stories like this. Acetaminophen is the nation's leading cause of acute liver failure. A survey of 46 patients treated for acetaminophen-related liver damages at the University of Pennsylvania found that the main reason patients hadn't paid close attention to the recommended dose is that they thought the drug was safe. And why wouldn't they?
So this is crazy. If you can stop acute liver failure causes, by taking something off the shelf,
I know.
why wouldn't you do it? Just remember that as we're talking about the FDA.
In 1982, the company launched a secret program to create a safer version of Tylenol. They had all these outside researchers come, sign NDAs. In an email uncovered in litigation, they decided that they couldn't put this new and improved and safer version of Tylenol out because if they did that, it would be acknowledging that the existing product on the market isn't as safe as we've always said before. I think the thing that cooks J&J for me is their attitude on the stand when they're being sued by relatives of people who have died taking their products. There's a lot of cases where the parents are confused between like infant dosing and child dosing on acetaminophen products. And this is a lawyer for the family of Brianna Hudo, a 5-month-old who died after taking the dosage of Tylenol recommended to her by the nurse at the hospital where she was. A lawyer asked Johnson & Johnson's longtime medical director, Anthony Temple, how many babies had died as a result of dosing mix-ups between the infant and the child versions of the drugs. Over a 30-year period, he said, there are maybe a couple of dozen, maybe more, where incidents of significant liver injury has occurred, and there's probably a handful of those cases were fatal. By the way, I'll note, if you have significant liver damage, it's not just like you live your life. Like oftentimes you end up having to have a kidney transplant. There's like a lot of long-term effects of acute liver damage. Anyway, here's the lawyer. And for 25 years, you've elected to continue to offer infants Tylenol in the concentrated form that has led to the death of babies, correct? Yes, we've continued to do it. The lawyer pressed him. Rather than pull those products off the shelf, that's sort of the cost of doing business. Temple agreed. J&J felt the benefit as, well, really it's the FDA because it hasn't pulled it off either, but the benefit to children of having the product available was appropriate to keep it in the marketplace, yes. Who? Not the parents of the kids who died. And if parents thought that there was a chance the Tylenol could kill their kid, you would likely think that they are not going to use that product, that they're going to use a competitor's product. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's other pain relievers for kids. The jury ended up ruling in the favor of Brianna's family. They received $1 million settlement, but not before J&J appealed the verdict all the way up to the Supreme Court, who declined to hear the case. I'd be remiss not to add this. We are recording this on September 22nd, and I haven't seen any news about this come out yet, but there is, I think, an announcement coming out today about a connection between Tylenol taken by pregnant women and autism. In case you're looking here specifically for an update, I don't have one for you, but by the time you hear this, I'm sure more news will be out about it. Now, notably, Tylenol, as of today, is made by Kenvue, which is the company that was spun off of J&J in 2023. For what it's worth, Dr. Nathaniel DeNicola, who advises the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists on environmental issues, says that there is no credible scientific link that Tylenol causes autism. I think that the scary thing about this is that if they don't end up finding a link between Tylenol and autism, then people start questioning links that are actually proven by science. Like for all these MAHA people, put aside autism, stay on Tylenol. But go elsewhere. You know what I mean? This is killing babies.
Yeah.
I got this is the frustrating thing with me about the MAHA stuff is I'm just kind of like, no. Same energy, just like go 45 degrees different direction and you will find what you're looking for. But it ain't seed oils and it ain't autism, but it is Tylenol. You're so close. You're so fucking close. And Johnson & Johnson is frankly very lucky for the MAHA people are headed off in the other direction, right?
Where is the FDA?
Well, I think perfect timing. You ready to get into corporate gossip number 2?
Sure.
FDA texts Johnson & Johnson, are you guys mad at us? So this fact kind of blew my mind. Curious if it was a mind-blowing fact to you too, that the FDA is partially funded by the drug companies that it regulates. Half of the FDA's funding comes from user fees. 45% of the FDA's budget. Before the 1990s, taxpayers paid the entirety of the FDA budget, but in the 1980s, partially because of FDA's lollygagging when it came to the AIDS epidemic. Patient advocates, researchers, regulators, industry reps pushed for legislation so that the FDA could get more funding and they could expedite review process for life-saving drugs, right? What this amounts to today is that when drug companies submit to the FDA, they have to submit like an application fee. And that application fee ultimately pays for half of the FDA's budget.
That's crazy. How much is it? Did you look up like how much an individual application fee is, or does it depend on the company? It gives you a little bit of an idea, I guess, into why it is so expensive to create a drug, right? Not only the R&D, but then you have this application fee, and then you're waiting for FDA approval, Little did I know the FDA approval comes with, I pay a big check to you, you rub my back, as long as I'm not cold-blooded murdering people. But even in some cases, if I am, you're going to let me go.
It's somewhere in the millions. It's like several $1 million. I'm getting kind of different numbers, as low as 1.4 and as high as 5.3, but it's somewhere in that range to submit, right?
It's funny though, right? Because they are paying, the big pharma's paying for it, and you outlined a PBS Q&A for me, which gave kind of like 3 reasons why the FDA is struggling. It's paid for by big pharma. They avoid conflict at pretty much all costs.
Another element that you didn't touch on is that more than a quarter of the FDA employees who approved cancer and hematology drugs from 2001 to 2010 left the agency and now consult for pharmaceutical companies. So you're going to make a lot more money working for industry than you will working for the federal government. And if you're responsible for reviewing J&J's application and then you decline it for whatever reason, it's pretty likely they're going to put you on a blacklist, right? You could argue that there's a public benefit to having some of those experts of the FDA approval process inside these companies. Like, it will speed up approvals. The thing I want to focus on is that companies like Johnson & Johnson use the supposed independence of the FDA as a way to skirt accountability. Here's an example, okay? This is from a 2001 CBS investigation about a drug called Propulsid. Okay. Gage Stevens was born fussy. His parents took him to a specialist to figure out why he cried so much. The doctor said the problem was simply acid reflux and enrolled Gage in a study she was conducting on the heartburn drug Propulsid. A few months later, Gage died in his sleep. His parents were told it was sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Nobody told them Propulsid might be the culprit. Gage's parents didn't know that Propulsid had been linked to dozens of deaths, including at least one other baby, before Gage even got his first dose. Shortly after Gage died, Propulsid was pulled from the market, linked to more than 300 deaths. This was a drug given to treat acid reflux, okay? Federal officials told Johnson & Johnson that the drug might have to be banned for children or even withdrawn altogether because of the deaths for an antacid. Instead, the government and the company negotiated new warnings for the drug's label, though not nearly as tough as the regulators wanted. Sales of Propulsid soared to $1 billion. Johnson & Johnson continued to advertise the drug as safe for children, which, by the way, the drug was no more effective than Tums, which, as far as I know, there's no deaths linked to Tums. I actually Googled whether you can overdose by Tums, and it's very hard. They're very chalky.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, until they came out with the chewables, nobody can eat more than one of those fuckers.
Those chewables are delicious to boot.
Oh, my God. The chewables, that's when I did the same thing when the chewables came out. I was like, how many can I eat of these,
Well, you can eat a significant amount and not OD. Not the same with Propulsid. 2 years later, as reports of heart injuries and deaths mounted, Johnson & Johnson continued defending the safety of Propulsid, but then pulled it from the market before a government hearing threatened to draw attention to the drug's long, largely hidden record of trouble. So what the fuck? Why would the FDA approve this drug when you got Tums on the market already that doesn't kill babies? Pretty good value prop, in my opinion. There are several factors here, right? We noted the corruption of the FDA, the revolving door. There are some points at which the FDA references its main customer as the industry, not the consumer.
Right.
But I will say, like, the vast majority of the people who work for the FDA are trying to do the right thing. The 99% of people that are working there, right? They're trying to balance speed, trying to get new potentially life-saving drugs out to the public, balance that with safety risks and bureaucracy on an extremely tight budget. They get shit from Wall Street when they take too long, and they get shit from Congress when their limited budget causes them to miss things. Either way, J&J benefits, right? They get to exert their influence to defang the FDA, and they get to use the FDA for cover when they market dangerous drugs. And I'll note here, because of Trump's cuts in 2025, 3,500 FDA workers, which is 15% of their workforce, have been laid off. The Trump administration is proposing a further $6.8 billion budget cut, or 5.5%, for the 2026 fiscal year for the FDA. Ever wonder how brands like Glossier, Sweetgreen, and Warby Parker are constantly releasing new, innovative, creative campaigns that are both eye-catching and sales-driving? That's the power of a big ad agency. The only problem is most large agencies cost $40, $100, or $200K just to get in the door. So what are small businesses and startups supposed to do? Just struggle in Canva? That's where Studio Govan comes in. They bring skilled enterprise experience to brands looking to grow at a price that won't wipe them out. The owner, Lauren, has head up creative teams at brands like Tula Skincare, Theory, and Saks Fifth Avenue. She burnt out in the corporate world, but then she set out to return to her passion, building brands from the ground up. She brings the best of what she's learned at large, successful companies and hones in on the most valuable assets for startups. Do we need to spend money on a fancy photo shoot? Is a Shopify developer really worth it? We know what we want our brand to be, but how do we actually bring it to life? Studio Govan will help answer all those questions and more. Their mission? Blending brand with performance to set you up for long-term sustained success. Go to studiogovan.com for more. That's studiogovan.com, or click the link in our show notes. Ready for corporate gossip number 3?
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to call this episode J&J Credo on opposite day. So the thing about drugs is there's often side effects, right? Like a cancer drug might cause nausea, or a painkiller causes constipation, but there's a general sense that the side effects are more tolerable than the initial condition that you're being treated for, right? But then there's a drug called Risperdal. At various times throughout this episode, Adam and I say Risperdal, and we say Risperdal. The correct name of the drug is Risperdal. J&J's executive tries something completely new. They go, okay, guys, what if we created a drug that was ineffective, check, expensive, check, killed elderly people who took it, check, and then he goes to the last slide, causes permanent disfiguration in children. Everyone goes, I don't know about that. Those things sound bad. And then he goes, hang on. It also makes us filthy, stinking rich. Benefits outweigh the risks. Am I right, boys? It's classic math. That's the story of Risperdal, which is kind of a next generation of antipsychotics that J&J set out to make when the patent on Haldol was set to expire in the mid-1980s. Haldol is like a really old antipsychotic drug. Now, Haldol has like its own baggage. It was being used as a chemical straitjacket in nursing homes when elderly dementia patients were being like too loud or aggressive. To this day, by the way, there are studies in nursing homes that show that they use antipsychotics unnecessarily to cut down on staffing needs. You can thank private equity for that. Anyway, so they set out to create this new antipsychotic.
The reason why they needed to make this is because their patent was running short, right? So like we know
their patent on Haldol was running
short, right? And we know that's how drug companies make money, because once their patent runs out, it can be made generically, and that's when the customer, gets to see all the savings. So they need something new to boost profits. And, 2019, we have the patent. 2020, we don't. Shareholders are not going to like that missing revenue.
They were like, okay, so if we can kind of create something new, maybe we can create an antipsychotic drug that doesn't completely knock people out, right? Maybe we keep them somewhat lucid. This was part of a new wave of mental health drugs that became the most profitable class of drugs in history. If you are in psychology, these are called atypical drugs. I'm not going to get into the details here, but people who were prescribed...
More like atypical.
A nice one.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a little bit. People who were prescribed these drugs were often homeless or unable to have health care through their jobs because of their mental health issues. So it was often Medicaid who picked up the bill. For 15 years, these atypical drugs were the single biggest expense for Medicare. In study after study, Risperdal was found to be less effective and had worse side effects compared to Haldol, which was much cheaper. In this case, the FDA did not roll over. They didn't let J&J say on the label that Risperdal was just as effective as Haldol. So now J&J has a problem. They've sunk a ton of money into this new drug. It's clear that they're not going to easily get patients to flip to this new version of the drug that's 40 times more expensive but isn't effective. J&J execs set sales targets well above the existing user base of homeless schizophrenics on Medicare, right? So the NBA's come up with a new plan. We need to expand our audience. We need to market the drug to more people. And in comes a strategy called sell the symptoms. We heard about this in the incest episode. Remember, pain is pain. It doesn't matter whether that pain comes from cancer or fibromyalgia. Violent outbursts are violent outbursts. Doesn't matter if it comes from a homeless schizophrenic or your 13-year-old son. A rep would go into a doctor's office, a child psychiatrist's office, and ask a doctor if they had any patients that had certain symptoms such as anxiety, hostility, impulsiveness, agitation. Then the rep would say, I have a drug that treats all of these symptoms, whether or not your patient is schizophrenic or not. Risperdal is effective in treating those symptoms. This is obviously illegal. For comparison's sake, this is from the book, the symptoms of a bacterial infection include headache, but an antibiotic can't be marketed as a headache remedy, right? So J&J knew this was illegal, and so did other pharma giants when they started copying Johnson & Johnson strategies. And this is where Alex Gorski comes in. He is an ex-military guy. He's a Wharton MBA, and he's the architect of this plan. Gorski at one time has said that the key to successfully climbing the corporate ladder was meeting sales goals. He's like, you got to be able to perform in good markets and bad markets. When he took over the marketing of Risperdal, Gorski was given sales goals that were unattainable without breaking the law. And eventually, when he became in charge of the company, he would also set those sales goals that were way too high to achieve without breaking the law. This is where we get into the fraud triangle, baby. When you're up against the wall, you do things even if they're illegal. Here's the plan of attack to ensure that Johnson & Johnson gets a good ROI from Risperdal, which has a profit margin of 90%. First, they needed to protect Risperdal's sales to Medicaid, right? So they need to make sure that Medicaid doesn't figure out that Haldol is more effective. So they need to have taxpayers continue to pay for the higher priced drugs over the generic alternatives. They did this by putting state Medicare directors on the J&J payroll.
Smart.
That's illegal. But it worked. And state by state, Medicare directors mandated Risperdal and made it so that if doctors wanted to prescribe Haldol, they had to explain in writing why they wanted to do that.
Right. And we know all doctors are lazy bums who can't write.
And they said, if you don't follow our recommendations, you're going to lose Medicare funding. I don't know. Okay, if you have to use mob boss techniques to be good at business and threaten people, then I feel like maybe you're not good at business, but I don't know. I don't have a Wharton MBA, so I could be wrong. Then they implemented a good old speakers program, bribes given to doctors. Again, we learned about this in the incest episode. Basically, we're just going to give you money in exchange for prescribing medicine. They gave kickbacks to a pharmacy benefit manager called Omnicare in exchange for them switching patients from older, cheaper drugs to Risperdal. An executive described Omnicare's ability to switch market share from one drug to another as scary. For Johnson & Johnson, the deal with Omnicare was immensely profitable. One company executive calculated that for every $1 million in kickbacks to Omnicare, they generated $3.4 million in sales.
Wow.
The last thing that J&J did was to expand the market of Risperdal, specifically to young boys. They had to study this, right, on kids. So they took like the worst class clowns, the worst behaved kids in school, and they gave them Risperdal. And basically what it did was tranquilize them. And they said, look, is this kid talking back to the teacher anymore? Nope. Is he talking back to parents? Is he being stubborn? Does he have to do things his own way? Is he being disobedient? No. And the kid's like drooling.
Yeah, that's what I'm imagining. Like the kid's drooling on his desk.
Like obviously if you're half passed out, you're going to be less of those things. And so then from 1994 to 2003, the number of American children treated for bipolar disorder increased 40-fold. In 2003, 1% of the population under 20 were treated for bipolar, and 2/3 of them were boys.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, more than a third of the nation's psychiatrists were serving as part-time. A third of the nation's psychiatrists were serving as part-time sales reps for makers of antipsychotic medicines, and most of the rest were taking significant gifts of food, travel, and other valuable items. This really fucking pisses me off, because if you're going to argue that rates of bipolar and autism and ADHD has increased in youth, but you're not going to connect it back to the fact that Johnson & Johnson is paying off doctors to unnecessarily diagnose these kids with bipolar so that they could prescribe them Risperdal, then you're not telling the whole story. How many stressed out parents working multiple jobs that have kids that are so fucked in the head because they're afraid of their school getting shot up and end up tranquilizing their young boys because a psychiatrist is getting a gift certificate to Delmonico's? There's one psychiatrist, Joe Biederman from Harvard, who's like a full-blown capo working for J&J pushing Risperdal. I'll use the Betty Davis quote on him. You should only talk good about the dead, and Joe Biederman is dead. Good. So one thing about Risperdal, side effect again, is that increases this hormone called pectocin, which is the hormone that makes your breasts produce milk when you're pregnant. It can also cause gynecomastia, which is when males develop breasts. And this rumor started going around in the psychology community, and J&J was like, fuck, we have to put this rumor to bed. So let's test this drug on mentally disabled children and see what happens. Now, this is ethically fucked. You can't just, the purpose of this test wasn't to determine whether or not these mentally disabled kids would benefit from the drugs.
See if they would grow man titties.
Isn't that insane? They had come out and said that something like less than 1% of kids would get gynecomastia when taking this drug. At the end of the study, they found out it was more like 1 in 10.
You know what's? It's like what does Thomas Edison say about making a light bulb? Well, Johnson & Johnson figured out exactly how to make boys have breasts.
Again, like, this is fucking fodder for the far right. Like, if you're so upset about gender in kids, then why don't you look at Johnson & Johnson, who's giving young boys breasts, right? Mm-hmm. Where the fuck are they getting angry at this? By that point in 2000, thanks to the sales of Risperdal among kids, Gorski had exceeded his sales goals. Company was selling $1.08 billion of Risperdal. Sales goal was only 1.05, so you know who got a big bonus.
Where do you learn to do that? Ranger school?
Seriously. We're going to get into Alex Gorski in the after show, but he's a real piece of shit. That year that they were selling $1.08 billion of Risperdal, 12,000 boys were permanently disfigured.
Yeah, when it's a disfigured, I started feeling bad about saying man tits.
You should feel bad.
Yeah.
It's really tough. Like, I can't imagine being a prepubescent boy or a pubescent boy and suddenly developing breasts. Like, I can't imagine. Like, and then that's something that needs to be taken care of by plastic surgery. You can't just like reverse the hormone.
Psychology. because you're going to get made fun of.
Yes.
There's no, oh my God. Yeah. You're going to get made fun of.
I can't imagine, Adam, I think in a different world, given like you were a normal middle school boy, but I think in a different world with different parents, there's a high chance that you could have been given Risperdal.
Sure.
So I think you just got lucky, and it's just sad. That study that they did on mentally disabled kids was bad, but they buried the evidence. I'm curious if, like INSYS, they had the interns eat the data. And then another study comes out in Australia. We've just been talking about young boys, but let's talk about the elderly patients that are taking Risperdal. Survey says they're getting strokes and dying at higher rates than other similar drugs. Let's keep that one inside the house, says one J&J executive to another. At that point, they controlled over half the antipsychotic market for the elderly. And by the way, they never had FDA approval. They were telling doctors to use the drug off-label, aka not only to homeless schizophrenics, saying that FDA approval was coming, hoping that it came, and then their off-label sales would have been retroactively approved. Now this study is coming out, and the FDA is never going to approve the drug. Like, fuck! So these J&J executives get together, notably on September 4th, 2001, and they try to figure out what to do. The whole reason they were telling themselves that they're illegally marketing this drug is that eventually, they tell doctors, the FDA will approve it. And now they have to explain that they were lying. Here's a contemporaneous report from that September 4th, 2001 meeting. There was an ethical moral slide. Instead of what you think it would say, which is addressing the ethical moral aspects of illegally selling a harmful drug, it noted that ending the company's marketing of Risperdal in the elderly population would relinquish obligation to patients, caregivers, and providers. Basically, they had a moral obligation to continue marketing Risperdal for elderly because otherwise the company would be seen as abandoning a needy population. Gorski and his team decided not only to continue their sales efforts to target the elderly, but expand them. A new 4-year kickback agreement started with Omnicare. We have a moral obligation for Alex Gorski to get his bonus. What? You want me to put my marina mechanic out of business? Wow.
Marina mechanic.
Another study in 2002, the worst yet. The drug proved not only to be no more effective than a placebo in treating dementia, but those getting the drugs suffered an even higher incidence of stroke. They took 7 studies about Risperdal in dementia patients. In 5 of the 7, the drug showed no benefits. They buried the studies. They never allowed them to be published. They would publish other studies where they cherry-picked information and said the drug still worked. Illegal. In 2003, Johnson & Johnson had a new back-to-school marketing campaign.
Oh, I love the back-to-school marketing campaign for antipsychotics.
You want to tell them what they were doing?
It was my favorite marketing campaign. No, go ahead.
No, tell them.
Oh, ice cream parties and school psychiatry offices.
Ice cream parties!
Because there's nothing that teachers who are way underpaid appreciate more than free food.
Free food and kids who are half passed out because they've taken.
God, if I tranquilize kids. What about the state test? Drool is not the answer.
They were selling dissolvable Risperdal for like your kid doesn't like to take pills. Your kid doesn't like being tranquilized. Here, just scoop that in his orange juice. Put that little bit in his Tang.
Do you think it showed up in the president's physical test too?
Yeah,
he didn't run the mile. He fell asleep at the finish. Fell asleep at the starting line.
It wasn't until 2004 to 2005 when several whistleblowers at J&J, who were salespeople who were disturbed by the sales practices for off-label uses of Risperdal, brought suit against Johnson & Johnson. Only then did they stop marketing Risperdal to child psychiatrists, right? And then that's when we start getting some of the, if your child has grown breasts because they took Risperdal, call us now. These guys literally don't ever want to do the right thing until they're just about to get caught. Like never, ever, 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 ever. Stop marketing it to young kids, but kept marketing it to elderly people. Sales reps would tell doctors that they could never be sued for prescribing Risperdal to dementia patients who subsequently died because no one would be able to tell whether that drug had killed them or they just passed away naturally. Are you a scorned lover trying to kill your husband with antifreeze spiked Gatorade? Like, what the fuck is this? And they told doctors if they wanted to avoid getting caught, because remember, these doctors were getting paid for prescribing it. If you want to avoid getting caught, diagnose that patient with schizophrenia.
Nice.
Can you imagine your 85-year-old grandma gets diagnosed with schizophrenia? By the way, that's like a genetic disease. I can't imagine. Then you have to live your whole life worrying that your kid's going to have dementia. I mean, schizophrenia.
Yeah. Am I hearing things?
By the way, it's so rare for late onset schizophrenia is so rare. Like if you don't get it by the age of 25, my mom would always tell us this. She'd be like, once you hit 25,
I was so worried about schizophrenia. I was like, yeah.
Until you're 25. Then you're like, I'm basically in the clear.
Yeah. But I think that's about like every mental disorder that I was worried about having.
Well, careful. You could have a doctor get you when you're 85. Resveratrol sales grew 18% in 2005 after that marketing pitch. After they're telling doctors how to get around the circling net of the FDA, resveratrol sales grew 18% in 2005 to $3.6 billion, 17% in 2006 to $4.2 billion. To this day, 21% of nursing home residents are given resveratrol.
That's crazy.
Studies show that between 2000 and 2019, resveratrol caused 1.2 million needless deaths among the elderly, which is probably a severe underestimate because, like they said, no way to tell if it's because of resveratrol or not. I know.
Murder.
To this day, resveratrol kills between 20 and 65,000 patients every year. By comparison, opioid deaths, 16,000 a year.
And people give a shit about opioid deaths. You don't hear anyone talking about resveratrol deaths.
In 2012, Alex Gorski becomes CEO of J&J.
Yeah, good work.
At the time he was selected, he was actively under criminal investigations by federal prosecutors over resveratrol's fraudulent marketing. Documents filed said he was actively involved in fraudulent matters and he had first-hand knowledge of the alleged fraud.
Well, to Johnson & Johnson, that's just good experience to have.
Exactly.
You want to have a guy who's a freaking vault when the FDA comes a knocking, when the government comes a knocking. you want a guy who can handle congressional hearings real well. Cool under pressure, as they say.
When the Johnson & Johnson board was explaining why they chose Gorski, they said that one of his crowning achievements was buying a company called Synthis. It was the biggest acquisition in Johnson & Johnson's history up to that point. Previously, they had 4 executives go to prison for conducting illegal experiments in humans where they killed at least 5 people after injecting liquid cement into their spines.
That's insane. That sounds like wow, how am I just hearing about this now?
You know what Gorski says? That's a distressed asset, baby. Scoop it up.
Wait.
Wait.
Apple, IBM, JP Morgan, you want me on the board? Sure thing. Yeah. Makes sense. You guys got any liquid cement we can inject into Jamie Dimon's head?
When Gorski made the acquisition of Synthis, he said that he liked it because Johnson & Johnson and Synthis had similar corporate cultures.
Nice.
In 2013, J&J paid $2.2 billion to settle criminal and civil investigations into the legal practices, including off-label marketing and kickbacks to doctors and pharmacists around resveratrol. 2019, they paid $800 million to settle. There was a discussion of the Department of Justice and federal prosecutors charging J&J criminally, like sending executives to jail. But first of all, they're chicken shit, and they're not going to do that. Johnson & Johnson is one of the biggest individual clients of corporate law firms in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They spend $25 billion on litigation, as I mentioned. These federal prosecutors, like the people at the FDA, want to get hired by these big corporate law firms, and these big corporate law firms are not going to hire them if you're on the J&J shit list.
Yes.
So, yeah. And remember, like $2.2 billion, I mean, that's, again, the cost of doing business. They made $3.2 billion in 1 year.
I would guess that.
So let's finish it off with corporate gossip number 4, which is oops, extra asbestos. Johnson & Johnson baby powder. Okay, we're going to end it with that. This is like the crown jewel product for the company. You probably remember the scent. Can you smell it now?
There's a good chance that your parents put it on you.
On your bottom.
Yeah,
on your
bottom.
bare bottom.
We should all have a class action against them.
Mama, I thought you were dressed.
Oh, I forgot to put on my powder, honey.
I'm getting married in 1 hour.
And I'm going to be cool and collected, even if it is the hottest day of the year.
Oh, I should have known.
Well, you told me not to be too emotional.
Oh, Mama.
You know, the first time I ever used this.
No, Mama, when?
When you were just a baby.
Johnson's Baby Powder, a feeling you never outgrow. From Johnson & Johnson.
A lot of people, including I think our parents, also use Johnson & Johnson baby powder or the shower to shower product in between showers. Women would use it on their crotch a lot to, for sanitary purposes. Obviously it's not sanitary, it's a self-cleaning oven, but that was the thing at the time, right? So here's the thing about talc. I learned a lot about the chemical composition of talc when I was researching this company. And the thing about talc is the only difference between talc and asbestos is the amount of pressure that it's under for the amount of time, right? When you're mining for talc, it is impossible to retrieve talc from the ground and not have it cross-contaminated with asbestos.
Got it.
It's like, they described it like it's like taking out sugar from salt.
Wait, I'm confused. Mining talc. Where does the mining of talc take place?
There's like a talc mine in Vermont, New Hampshire.
Okay, so
it's like all over
it's
the
a
world.
natural compound.
It's a natural compound. Asbestos, right, which they used to mine and used to use in cars and planes and buildings. I mean, it used to be
Like lead
everywhere in the
paint.
60s
Right,
because
right.
it's very useful, like chemically. But then they discovered in the 60s and 70s that it was giving people cancer, and then by the 80s and 90s they removed asbestos from a lot of the products that we consume today. It's also clear that Johnson & Johnson's talc-based baby powder was contaminated with asbestos. And just so you know, there's no maximum amount of asbestos that you can put on your body. Like any amount of asbestos can cause cancer.
There's no safe amount of asbestos.
There's no safe amount of asbestos that you can put in and or around your body.
A thimble full of asbestos. Too much asbestos.
Yes. And the other thing about asbestos is everybody's different. You could be exposed to asbestos, a lot of it, for years. You could have been working on a job site in the 80s and you could have never gotten cancer. Other people could have been exposed to it once through baby powder and they can get cancer.
Wow.
It's not, there's no predictability in terms of that, right? So there's no safe level of asbestos. As early as 1992, Johnson & Johnson had found asbestos in its talc-based baby powder at levels that were rather high. Despite decades of evidence linking talc-based baby powder to various cancers, Johnson & Johnson continued to sell the product. Bury research, intimidate scientists, all the things that we've already seen in this episode. They made up their own bullshit test that they passed to basically prove that their baby powder was asbestos-free. Again, not possible.
They covered up as best as they can.
They sure did. Nice. In 1989, 105 years after the company first introduced talc-based baby powder, 20 years after talc was first connected with cancer, other companies started replacing talc with cornstarch in their baby powder. Works just as well, smells just as well, doesn't kill you. Okay? Johnson & Johnson still used talc. Why? Because if they switched, then they would be admitting that their product was dangerous. And the only thing they know how to do is double down. 2005, even though Johnson & Johnson was required by law to include information on cancer risks on its products, like its shower-to-shower product, which was at that time half cornstarch and half talc, there was a package that came out that had a label on it that said this product might cause cancer. A J&J executive replied in an email, "Do not send out any packaging with this statement on it," and with
30
exclamation points. So they just removed it, deleted it from the packaging. Illegal. Here's another ad. Talc is safe, right? They say, our talc is safe. It's a common mineral that's part of all of our lives. It's in our food, our cosmetics, our gyms, and yes, it's in baby powder. It's the softest mineral on earth, and we use only pure pharmaceutical grade talc. We test every lot to ensure it. Again, not possible. In 2008, they considered changing the baby powder to cornstarch again. More and more articles were coming out about the dangers of talc-based baby powder, and marketing executive finally had enough. Okay. His name was Todd True. And he said, I listened to our credo. I want to use it as our guide. I think we should eliminate the use of talc in Johnson's baby powder. I know this is controversial. I know we're going to have to work hard to justify the cost implications of this idea, but everybody else who makes baby powder is using cornstarch. Everybody else has abandoned talc. But Johnson & Johnson shelved this idea because it would open a can of worms for the company. They didn't want to say that talcum powder was ever bad. Finally, in May 2020, Johnson & Johnson announced that they stopped selling talc-based baby powder in the United States and Canada because of slowing demand. This is unbelievable, fueled by misinformation around the safety of the product and a constant barrage of litigation advertising. The company later decided to stop selling talc-based baby powder globally in 2023. In 2018, a St. Louis jury ordered J&J to pay $4.7 billion to 22 women and their families who say that the powder contributed to their ovarian cancer. Remember, a lot of these women were putting it on their crotch. Last year, a woman in California who says J&J baby powder caused her to develop mesothelioma was awarded $29 million. They are still in bankruptcy court to this day, trying to agree to a settlement to resolve 60,000 ovarian cancer lawsuits. Gorski tried to pull a Sackler family and shield itself with bankruptcy protection, but the judge rejected it, so it's still in the courts. Johnson's baby powder contributes to 2,500 women in the United States being diagnosed with ovarian cancer every year and 1,500 dying. In a bunch of these lawsuits, people are awarded, a Massachusetts man was awarded $43 million after he proved Johnson & Johnson baby powder caused his mesothelioma. J&J's global vice president of litigation says the verdict is based on junk science. Now, here's what another lawyer for the firm says. Listen to this. While prosecutors and investigators saw J&J as the worst of the worst, the company's attorneys refused to concede, claiming that Johnson & Johnson executives thought they had a First Amendment right to sell products they believed in, and they knew they were a good company. You know what Benjamin Franklin said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all corporations have the right to gaslight the public, twist the FDA by the balls, and kill consumers in the name of shareholder value." I think let's end it there. Fuck you, J&J, and maybe if we get rid of the First Amendment right, maybe the upside will be Johnson & Johnson can't kill us anymore.
Right.
That would be nice. Do you want to move to the takeaways?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I'm just completely mind-boggled by this, and I talked a little bit about how frustrated I am with the Maha contingent of it all, because it's like it starts from a good place, right? Like, you should be, listen to all this. Like, we should be concerned about some of the things that are marketed to us as safe and are actually dangerous. Like, there is some real concern there. It's very frustrating to me that the Maha contingent of it all is so misdirected, because they should be angry, but they're angry at the wrong people, in my opinion.
Well, a lot of the Maha is libertarian, right?
Right.
So it's like, well, Johnson & Johnson should operate under free market, and like,
yeah, I guess they want to basically go back.
There should be no regulation, right? But like, we obviously know that companies are not operating with your best interests in mind.
They want to go back to the 1800s, pre-FDA, when people were marketing all different types of snake oils that would kill you immediately, right? The other thing that I think is interesting is all the whistleblowers in this story are the sales reps. So It's never executives, it's never scientists or
sales
doctors.
Reps.
It's people who don't have like a vested financial interest in keeping this company a going concern. We learned about this in INSYS, right? There are a lot of sales reps who wanted to help people with their pain.
I would have expected the scientist to raise the red flags.
The scientists at J&J are paid NDAs, they're paid off, they're often intimidated. So it's very unlikely for them to actually, and think about it this way. They come out and they say, I'm blowing the whistle on this. I'm publishing a study that calls out Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson executives can turn it around and say it's a FUD campaign, right? You're jealous, you're angry at us, right? This is misinformation, this is bullshit. But when a sales executive comes out with actual marketing materials, actual emails that they've received, like telling them to do something that's illegal, it's a little bit more stable.
Yeah,
ground.
I remember from Purdue the marketing materials being like the main exhibit with how the product was being marketed, right?
Yeah. What do you think about Alex Gorski?
Alex Gorski started as a sales guy, so he's not doing much justice for sales guys here.
No, I know. He's a business guy. He's a sales guy. He's a Wharton MBA. We're going to talk about him further in the after show, but he did end up stepping down in 2022 after 10 years. And as you mentioned, he's now on the board of Apple, IBM, JP Morgan. He's got 1 million fucking humanitarian awards. And I think he's going to be the next John Kapoor. Like, I cannot imagine with all this information that's coming out about Johnson & Johnson that he doesn't ultimately face some type of criminal liability. Any other takeaways from you?
Yeah, right. So my wife has ulcerative colitis, and she also has been dealing with like just a lot of headaches. And she is told because of her ulcerative colitis, she needs to take Tylenol because of the stomach stuff that as in their marketing materials. Well, she just went to a headache specialist, and she was saying how much Tylenol he was taking. He was like, whoa, that is way too much Tylenol. So I sent her these articles, and she's reading it. But I was talking to her at lunch today, and I was saying, I guess, is there anything else you can take? She's like, well, I'm not supposed to take ibuprofen. This doctor says I could take it, but what are my alternatives?
So I read in this article that you can take ibuprofen, you just have to take Tums as a stomach protectant. I'm not a doctor, but that's what they said in the book.
The doctors who she's gone to, because she's gone to her GI doctor, this guy who specializes in headaches, and some other doctors, like her general practitioner.
Yeah.
They've all given her different answers. So it's like, where are they getting there? They're clearly not on the same page, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, okay, so my question is, how can we change things so that when new discoveries are made, we make a company say, hey, we are changing the formula,
but
this is not an admission of guilt.
Yeah.
They're penalized for trying to change when new science comes out or new discoveries come out. So like, what can we do to make it so that it's easier for them to be like, we fucked up? To Johnson & Johnson's point, they're not going to come out. They're going to be like, fuck, well, it is an admission of guilt. Like, we're too far down this path. I think it's completely wrong when you're putting human lives, but there's somebody who's listening and be like, well, it is shareholder value maximization, right? The system in place doesn't set them up to be able to be like, hey, look, we fucked up. You're going to bankrupt the company. And it's like, at that point, you're like, am I going to bankrupt this company, or am I just going to cover the shit up?
I think what we learned from this story is the entire system is fucked and needs some serious overhaul and some serious accountability for where things have gone wrong. I think Johnson & Johnson, for their part, much worse than other pharmaceutical companies, took advantage and exploited the issues that they saw within the FDA. And I think, listen, some people would say that's good business. You're going to, that's part of doing business.
The only reason in my mind they are much worse than other pharmaceutical companies is because of the breadth of products that they have and the length of time they've been around for.
And
I think everybody else is doing the same shit as,
But I think the key is people are very wary of Merck and Pfizer. And for some reason, for so long, Johnson & Johnson has this halo effect where people think that it's Johnson & Johnson. They must be doing right by me, even though they are just as bad as all the other ones.
I disagree. I'm curious if the listeners think the same, but I disagree. I think when I think of pharmaceutical companies, I think about all pharmaceutical companies as Purdue Pharma.
You think of them, I'm saying you have a negative impression of them.
Johnson & Johnson included.
Oh, okay. So I think that a lot of people, Yes, curious what you think. Did this change your opinion on Johnson & Johnson? Did you already kind of have negative feelings towards them that this has only cemented? Or were you completely mind blown and, like me, kind of had a positive reputation, had a positive image of them in your mind that this had really punched a hole through? Because I think it depends. I think this is an interesting litmus test of like, how much do you trust, right? How much good feelings do you have from when you were a baby using these products? Things that you didn't even necessarily have a conscious choice of in terms of your perception of this brand. And I think it's really interesting. And I think a lot of people will listen to this episode and take different things away from it. So let us know. What did you take from this? What was interesting to you? What was surprising to you? What made you angry? What made you hopeful, if anything? I think, listen, not a lot, but the fact that we know about this now is always a good thing. And I think props to Gardner Harris, who I did reach out to. And I said, if you ever wanted to come on the podcast, we'd be happy to have you. I fortunately haven't heard back.
We must have like a second degree of separation from Gardner. Somebody knows Gardner Harris out there.
Maybe if you know him and can put in a good word, we'd love to talk to him. All right. Well, we will wrap it there. And stay tuned for a good news story from Elizabeth Liu. For San Francisco listeners, I think you guys will find this one rather interesting. And we will see you in the after show where we're going to talk about Alex Gorski. We're going to get into the drama all around him. So, all right. See you guys soon. Bye.
Along the San Francisco waterfront lies an abandoned industrial waste field that is teeming with art. Less than 50 years ago, the Albany Bulb was a dumping ground for chemical waste, rubble from the I-70 construction, World War II shipbuilding, and condo towers. In the 1980s, the land was bought by a developer who hoped to turn the misshapen island into a shopping mall and high-rise offices. The community fought back and approved 2 bond issues to buy back the land, protect the wildlife, and establish a public park stretching from Richmond to Oakland. Locals voted to leave the rubble and metal scraps and let nature take over the land instead. Since then, artists have used the rubble as their canvas, organically creating art on concrete and crafting sculptures and murals. The art is aided by the nonprofit Love the Bulb, which helps to facilitate events around the park, including bird walks, journal gathering, Tai Chi, and speaker events on climate change prevention. Angela Armendariz is a program coordinator with the nonprofit and says that her role is not to enforce rules, but rather to support and continue the facilitation of art as it appears. Another resident and frequent visitor of the park said, "You'll see everything from organized efforts to people who just drop in because they love making things. The art is filled with messages of hope and resistance, and in the coming years, Love the Bulb hopes to create outdoor classrooms and educational centers for all to use." If you're based in the San Francisco area and would like to help, you can volunteer to help clean up the park, or you can write a letter to your city council member letting them know that you want to preserve the space. If you're based outside of San Francisco and would like to learn more or donate, you can go to www.albanybulb.org. If you're looking for a way to express yourself creatively within your own community, I would suggest checking out your local community center if you have one. Many will offer art classes for free or at a discounted price, and I can speak from personal experience. My mother has been going every week for the past 3 months, and it's been a great way for her to try something new and meet new people. But if anything, you should go outside. Art exists everywhere you look, you just have to pay attention.